Hi everyone, Martin here. Happy New Year for 2022. This is the first video for our FEDSA mentoring sessions for the year. Apologize for starting so late into the year. We're going to be doing things a little bit differently this time around. We're just going to test it and see how it works. Currently, some people aren't able to make it, the regular people. So what we're going to try to do is record a video offline, as well as give you a repo which contains questions for the content that we covered the week in that week. And then during the week in the FEDSA mentoring channel on Slack, you're free to come and ask us any questions. But then notably on Friday, a whole bunch of us will be there, a bunch of seniors and all of that are there to handle any questions you have for the content we've covered, as well as anything else, fun projects you're working on, or design decisions that you might have. Okay, great. So this week we're going to start off and we're going to be kicking it off with array methods. Right. Okay, so let's kick it off. Right, so what are array methods? Array methods are methods that are available to arrays. So you can't call them on numbers or other types of variables or even objects. Although there is a way to run them on objects. They can only be called on arrays. So I've actually got MDN open here up on a page, and you'll see here on the left there's actually quite a lot of methods. And even if you're new to JavaScript, you've probably still actually been using things like array, like push on an array, so that it puts a value into an array. But there's ones that will actually that are very important to know as a JavaScript developer. They'll actually allow you to make your code a lot more concise, as well as allow you to achieve a lot of sort of complex operations with very little code. So you do need to know them, especially once you start moving to things like React. We're always using them. Okay, so before we kick it off, I just want to mention some of the array methods that we're doing. These array methods are always going to be returning a new array. In JavaScript, we don't really want to be mutating values, which means that, like, if I was passing an array into a function, we don't want to be going and changing those values in that function, in that array while it's in that function, because what JavaScript is going to be doing is it passes things by reference. So if you call a function with an array and you modify that array, it's actually modifying that original array. It's not modifying a new one. And there are ways to get around that. But so that's sort of like an important thing to know about developing in JavaScript. And that's sort of partially why these methods all return a new array. So you can act on an array, but you're actually going to have a new array that you're getting back. It's not going to mutate or modify the first array that you're working with. Okay, so let's have a look at the map method, array method. But there's also a couple of key things I want to touch on first, since it happens through all of the array methods, what I'm going to show you now. Okay, so let's just start off with just creating a new array. So let's just go const new array is equal to values dot map. Okay, so yeah, is how it starts off. We've got an array, and then, sorry, I should have actually shown you the other methods that are showing. So if I push dot, then you can see all of these other array methods, and we want map. That's right there, sorry. Want map, and then when I open the parentheses, now we're getting information over here. If you don't see this, there might be an error there if you don't see this information, but you should see it. Okay, so when we call an array method, there's a callback function that's going to run. So inside these parentheses, every single time this is going to loop, it's going to run this function. So just to sort of demonstrate what I'm talking about here, I'm going to just create a function called callback fn. Fn is sometimes means function, just when you're sort of demonstrating something. And then what I can have over here is my function, callback function. And when values maps and it goes over all that data, it's going to run this callback function, okay, for each of these values, because it's going to loop through all of these. Okay, so then when you've got this callback function, you're going to have a bunch of values available to you. Unfortunately, I've gone and done it this way. So let me actually reverse this. Let's do it as an anonymous function here first. Okay, so you can see that as soon as I open the parentheses, we've now got an order of variables that are going to come through. Okay, the first one is going to be the value. right? And that's each time it's looping, it's going to be each one of these values, okay? Then the next parameter that we've got available to us is the index, right? And these values, it's always in this order except for just a couple of ones where it's like reduced, it's not the same. But the rest of them, they're always going to be following this order where the first one is value, then the next one is index, and then the next one after that is going to be the actual array. We don't really need this at the moment at all, most of the time. It's usually just the value that we want, and then sometimes we also want the index. Okay, so then I'm going to go and just put that over here. So now this is an anonymous function that we've created here, and each time it's loops, we're going to have access to these variables over here. Now, what we could have done here instead is, let's just take this. We could have actually had that callback function that I was showing you earlier. The reason why I sort of backpedaled there was it wasn't showing us these variables pop up when VS Code just wasn't referencing it. So I just wanted to just show you again. So let's just do that. And then over here, we can have callback function. Okay, so when we've got this anonymous function over here, it's going to run this. But you could have also gone and actually given it a function name. And then it's actually going to run that function. Because this is a callback function that's running, except we've just made an anonymous function here. Now, majority of the time, you're not going to need to have it as an individual function like this, a separate function. But it can be useful. For example, when you may be sorting an array, and then you can actually have that sort function, and then you can reuse that sort function, like the comparator. You can interchange it and all of that. So there can be some uses for like actually having it separate like this, but most of the time you don't need to do this. The main reason for me is sort of just demonstrating this to you is so that I know people struggle with callbacks a little bit. So this is sort of just showing you sort of how callbacks are working. Or like at least this anonymous function that we've got this anonymous function here where you could have also just had this callback. Okay, so let's move on from that. So we've got our array here and it's going to map through the values. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go console log value and then save it. Okay, so now what it's doing is it's looping. One by one it's looping, and there you can see that there's these values that are getting output. Okay, so that's sort of like the basics of let's just say array methods, where they're just always going to be sort of following this pattern. So now let's actually dive into map and what it's doing and going from there. Right, so the map array method, what it's going to do is create a new array that's got the exact same number of elements that there were in the previous array. So it's sort of when you want to do like a one-to-one translation of something, or represent an array of values or items or elements as something else, but you're not allowed to remove any elements, you're not allowed to add any elements. You have to have the exact same number of elements. So because of that, where it's ideal is that you're taking data and you're going to sort of modify it into this new array. So for example, we've got these values here. What we're going to do is we're going to say return value plus, let's just say 1,000. Okay, so what it's going to do then is it's going to create a new array with 1,000 added to each of these values. Okay, so let's just save that. And now I'm going to go and console log the new array. Okay, so here's our new array. It's got the exact same values, except we've actually added 1,000 onto each of them. That might not seem so useful, but it's really got its uses. In React, it's amazing because basically what you can do is you can have an array of elements like this, or an array of values like this, and then map through them. And as it's mapping, you generate your actual HTML, and then you can put that value inside of it. So like that. I mean, that's not going to help us here. But so for example, in React, you can actually go and render it out like this. And not just in React, you can even in pure JavaScript, you can actually go and generate your code like this, like HTML, if you wanted to. But so the main thing to know is that you're getting sort of this one-to-one relationship. You can't add or remove values. Like if I was to go and just return null, we're just going to actually have a null sitting in our array. Okay. And yeah, so like you can also, sorry, I meant to give you a couple more examples where you can also make use of it is like as we're doing, yeah, we've got sort of math operations that are running, even if it's just a plus 1,000. But what if we had temperatures? What if these were Celsius and we wanted to convert them to Fahrenheit? You know, then you can map through them, do the conversion, which could actually be like a Fahrenheit function, a PL or something, and then there you're gonna have your array of all your values converted. Okay, so the next one we're going to be looking at is the filter array method. Filter array method is almost everyone's favorite, one of their favorites. And the reason why is that we can take an array and then depending on whether we return true or false, will determine whether this value is going to stay in your new array that's getting created. So you can filter things like on ages, anything you can basically think of. So it'll just be a Boolean check of whether it matches a condition, and if you return true, it's going to stay in your array, and if you return false, it's not going to be included in your new array. So let's work on that. Let's create a new array here and say it is equal to values.filter. I'm going to create an anonymous function here, and we just want the value. So I'm just going to call it value. We didn't look at index earlier, so let me just throw an index in here and just console log index. You'll see here that I've actually gone and I've put index inside of these curly braces. This is just a little trick when it comes to console logging. Sometimes it might be helpful. I didn't have to go and write index and then comma index. Sometimes that just wastes a bit of time. So what you can do is you create an object like this by putting it in curly braces, so that when you log it, it's logging it as a little object that's actually got the key and then the value. Okay, so you can see that it's looping. It's actually got the index, but that's really not what we're interested in here. Okay, so what I will do now though is we'll console log the value. Okay, so you can see the values there. Now let's say that we want to exclude anything that is 20 or smaller. Okay, so what we'll say is we'll say if value is less than equal to 20, we return true, else return false. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to look at our new array and save it, and there you go. Sorry, I actually had it the wrong way around. So let's do it. Everything is greater than 20. Okay, so now we're filtering anything that is less than 20 is going to be filtered out, or it's more like anything that's greater than 20, we're going to return true, and therefore it gets kept. Otherwise, we're returning false. Okay, so it really is just that simple. If we return true, the value is going to stay in this array. If we're going to return false, it's not going to it doesn't get included. Now, I've written in quite a long-winded way here. It automatically returns false, so we didn't actually have to write return false here. I just wanted to sort of show you how it's actually working. So if we take that out and we save, we've actually got the same results. Okay. But now we can actually take this further. Let's just take index out of here so that it's not there. Okay, so let's mess up my eyes, sorry. Okay, so what we can do now as well, this is basically a Boolean condition at the end of the day. It's either true or it's false, right? So what we can do is we can actually shorten this to basically be just if value is greater than 20. Okay, because this is basically evaluating. This expression of yeah is going to evaluate, and it's either going to be true or false. And so we've actually got the exact same thing happening here, but now it's become a lot more concise. So let's just go and save, and then you can see we've got the exact same results. This is an arrow function. If you're still new to arrow functions, I'm not going to cover them in this video, but there is an implicit return, which is just a super programming fancy word for saying that it's built in. So what's actually happening here that you don't see is there's actually a return that's running here, but you don't see it, only in arrow functions. But now if we actually wanted to add more lines of code to our arrow function, we would need to have to add these braces. But then our return is gone now because the return is yeah, not inside here now. The return is on the outside. So if we try to do the exact same thing, we would have to do this. And remember, this is evaluating. You just don't see it. So it's either, is this, let's say it starts with 10, So is 10 greater than 20? False, so it returns false. Then it does the next value. Then it comes down. Is 50 greater than 20? It is, so it returns true. Yeah, so that's the way how you can end up writing some concise code. But depending on who's leading your team and all of that, they might not want things to be. This is called a one-liner. They might not want it to be like this. They might want it to be a bit more clearer so that you can easily extend it. Like if I wanted to go and add something here very quickly, I can't do that. I have to go now and end up changing a whole bunch of stuff, just like we did earlier, you know. So I have to go here, and then I have to do that. Yeah, so people might not want it like that, but you should be aware though of what I was trying to show you there, where we could have had this expression running out with this condition, and it will then evaluate to either true or false. Okay, so that was filter. Let's move on to the next one. So the next one you're going to be looking at is reduce. Reduce is incredibly powerful. I'm going to say that this is really not most people's favorite once they actually get to use it, just because of all the things you can actually do with it. So let's just console log new array. Let's do values.reduce. Okay, now previously I said that they all sort of follow the same pattern. We've got value, then we've got index, then we've got the original array. Reduce works a little bit differently. What we've got, instead of starting with that initial value, the current element, we've actually got an accumulator or previous value or total that is a value that is being passed from the previous time this looped. Okay, so I know that's probably going to sound a bit confusing, but let me actually show you how it's actually working, and then it'll probably be a lot clearer. So previous value, and then current value. Okay. Right, so now you can see here we've got the same sort of setup like we had with map and filter, where we've got this current value that's getting looped each time. Now you can see it's not in the front like we had with map and filter. It's actually the second parameter that's happening in this callback. Okay, so let's get started now. So basically, each time this reduce is going to run, we are going to return previous value. And then when it runs again, previous value is going to be there again. And again, and again, and again, and again. So where reduce sort of becomes very powerful, and it's sort of in the name, is that if we had all of these values, we could run each time and add these values to this previous value, so that eventually we are sort of, we're actually summing all of these together. We're reducing this array down to one value. So let's just demonstrate that. There's more for me to explain, but let's just get some code in here. So I'm going to say previous value is plus equal to current value. Okay, save it. And this is console log new array. Shouldn't actually be called new array. That's bad naming. Should actually be called. Sorry, it's got to take that out. I'm going to call this total. Let's just slap it as an object. Okay, so then we can see our total's 190. Okay, so let's go over what's actually happening here, and try not to overthink this. It is actually quite a simple concept, and I know when I was learning, I'd overthink this entirely. So we've got this previous value. To me personally, I don't think of it as a previous value. I think more of it as a total, but the way it's running is like a previous value. In that each time this is running, this previous value is getting returned, and then it's accessible the next time it runs. And then it's accessible the next time it runs, and runs and runs and runs. So what we could do, like I showed you, is that we can add each of these values to this previous value to essentially become the sum of all of these numbers. Okay. There's some other things that are important to be aware of. When this runs, if we've got different data types, we could end up with unexpected results. So let me just try and demonstrate that quickly. Okay, so before I move on with that, let's just go and log this so we can actually see these values. Okay, so now you can see previous value, current value, previous value, current value. Right. So where the initial value can be quite useful and where you tend to have to use it is when data types need to change, or you need to be doing something with a certain data type method that's available to them, like an array method. So let's say in this case, what we actually wanted to do was, for whatever reason, we actually want previous value to become an array, and we're going to push all of these values into this new array. It's not really a great use case, but I think it will demonstrate what I'm trying to show you here. So if I was to go and say previous value dot push and then the current value, we are likely going to get an error. Okay, great. Here it says previous value dot push is not a function, and that is because when previous value is first running, it's starting off with 10 as the previous value and then 50 as the current value. You can see it here. But if I go now and over here, you can have basically as a second parameter, you can go and add an initial value here. So you can see it there. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to make it an empty array. Now, there's a couple of things to note here. The first is that we're actually going to have an extra loop. If we don't have an initial value, previous value is going to be the first value in the array, and then current value is going to be the second value. If we go and add an initial value, it's actually going to be the first value in the array. So it's almost like as if the array is like that. Okay. So when we save it now, you're gonna see there's actually gonna be an extra loop. And the other thing is that the error is gonna go away. So let's just actually go and save it. So you can see that the error has actually gone away. And the reason why is because when previous value first runs, it's now actually starting as an array. Where previously it was actually this value 10. And we can't do a dot push array method on a value of 10 because it's not an array. It hasn't actually got that push method available to us. But if we actually started with an initial value of just an empty array, we can then actually push onto this array and then keep pushing onto it. And the same kind of thing could have happened that maybe you wanted it to be an object, and then you would have maybe wanted to start with an empty object. And then sometimes there's also math operations where there's divides and multiply, and you just end up with weird calculations, and you actually just need to go with you just need to add a 1 here. Okay, so I think that's largely going to cover reduce. Thinking of what else I can cover regarding it. Oh yeah, there was just something else here. I don't know, I don't want you to get confused. When I'm actually opening this, you can see the previous value has got this entire array. This is not what the array looks like in each of these steps. This is an updated array. If you can recall at the start, we spoke about parsing by reference. So this first array, when we logged it, is the same array as this, and then the next one you'll see it's full as well. And you'll see this is a blue sort of block here, and if you hover over it, it says this value was evaluated upon first expanding. It may have changed since then. So the only way you could sort of read it correctly from looking at your console here is where you can see it over here. It's actually saying array, and then there's 0 items in here, then there's 1 item, then there's 2 items, 3 items, 4 items, then finally there's 5 items. And then this is the end result. But this end result in our console log is the same array as this, so it actually it mirrors those values. So what we can do here is we can stringify it. So let's just go JSON.stringify previous value. Just a quick one on JSON, which is JavaScript object notation. Basically, it's a way for us to send JavaScript out to other applications as well as get JavaScript back in a text format. So we can send out this sort of text format of our variables so that other programs can interpret it and turn it into JSON or something else. And then we can also get back this text and then turn it back into JavaScript. And it looks just like JavaScript objects. The only thing is that there's strings around the keys. Okay, so when we actually save here, now you're actually seeing what's the actual value of previous value. You can see that it first starts off with the empty array. Then actually, let's throw some current value in here. Save it. Okay, so you can see what the previous value is. It starts off now with this empty array, and current value is now the 10 from here, and then it just keeps, we just keep adding the value into it. But so this is actually how it actually really looks in your terminal now. Sorry, in your console, it's not terminal, console. It's not so great to look at it like this. So what you can do after this is you can pass it back into JSON. So we're basically making the result static. So it's not the same array anymore. It's not just the string. And then we're passing it back to an array. And that array is not the same array as the one that's getting passed in each time. Okay, so when we actually console log it now, you can actually see there is the empty array, and then we're actually adding the values in. And now you can also look at it properly with a debugger. Okay, so I believe that's reduce. Yeah, so the next one we're going to be looking at, it's actually two, which is find and find index. And these are ones that you should just always keep in the back of your mind. You want to be using them where possible. And basically what it will do is that it's going to look for something you've given it. Like, remember, all of these, there's the pattern that we return true or false. So as soon as you return true, it's going to stop iterating or looping through all of your things. So let's say we were looking for an ID of 8. It's going to stop here immediately. Okay, so what people tend to do, it's like a bit of a noob trap and it catches people out, is that say we wanted to go and get this value over here. So what you will sometimes find is that people are going to go and they're going to start using Falter. So we're going to go values.falter, and then let's just say current value. And then we've got an array method, and then let's just console log current value. Okay, so there you can see we're looping through these, and we are console logging each one. There's the first one, second one, third one, fourth one, fifth one. Now, what people do is, what can sometimes happen is that they will go and say if current value is equal to, current value.rd is equal to 8, then return true. Okay, so when we actually log this, sorry about that. Okay, so when we actually go and log this, we've now actually got that one value that we were filtering. You know, because filtering, you can filter it so that it keeps looking just for this one value. But even though we found 8, can you see that it actually went and it looped through every single item? Okay, now in this case, maybe that's not such a big deal. There's only 8 items. But what if there's 1 million items? And what if the value we wanted was 6? So it was this value here, the very second value inside of this array of values. And it still had another 1 million or 2 million or 20 million to still work through. So this is going to keep looping over and over and over, even though we know we've actually got the value we want. It's going to keep looping and looping and looping. And that is just an utter waste of resources. And so that's why I can't say that's why they've done it, but I like to think that is why we have now got the find or find index. Now what it would do is it's going to run very similar to filter in that you can sort of check it like this, except as soon as it finds whatever you've put here as true, it's going to stop. So if we only had this ID at 6, it's not going to loop all through all 2 million. So I would put 2 million here, but then, you know, it's going to be too much on the screen. It will stop here, and it's not even going to bother with the rest of them. So if you know that you've got this master list of items and you only need to find one thing, try and remember that you need to find or find index. So let's go and actually change this to find. And I think I won't even have to change any other code other than just switching that. And there you go. Okay. So look, literally like one, we didn't even change. We just changed the actual method from filter to find. And that's like not even a code change. That is you using your critical thinking and saving the day and making an app run a lot better. And it's not through any sort of like, you know, it's just knowing to apply the right thing. So really try and remember find, and use it when you need to try and actually find something. That's why it's called find. It's not like we're actually trying to filter to one. We don't want to filter one item out. We want to find one value. So you'll see that when we filter, we actually get the whole object back. The other thing we can do is we can also do find index. I might have said RD earlier, but it's actually find index. And then you can see what it actually does is it gives you the index of where it is in the array. Okay, so very short and sweet, that one, but it's like you don't forget about that one. That one is so important. Okay, so let's move on to the next. So I actually almost forgot about something. When you are using find or find index, what happens if you don't actually find the value that we want? So let's say we make it 7, and I know that there's no 7 here. What is actually going to happen? What we're going to end up getting is a -1 value. Okay, so yeah, you can see there's a -1. So that -1, and it's not a thing just in JavaScript. It's something that's been used like for a long time. If there's -1, then it wasn't able to find what it was looking for. And what you could then do is maybe go and say that if found value is equal to -1, then say, console log not found. Else it does whatever you want. Okay, so sorry, I actually just forgot about that. I just had to mention it. Okay, so now let's have a look at another two. They also sort of go hand in hand. They're kind of like opposites, and that is sum and every. Okay, so what sum is going to be, both of them are going to be relying on like true and false, like all the other array methods. But what sum will do is it will go and loop through all of these values, and as soon as we find one that matches our condition, it's just going to return true. It's going to stop looping and it's going to return true. It's almost like saying, does any of these values pass our condition? So it's more like, do some of them pass the condition? But it's actually just one. It only needs to find one case where it passes true, and immediately it's going to break out, and then it's going to be done. Okay, so let's just go and emulate that. So I'm going to say is sum is equal to values dot sum, and then you can see once again we've got that same pattern where there's value, and then there's index afterwards. So let's just go and say value. Okay, and I'll console log value.rd, and then we'll lastly console log sum. Okay, so right now we have not passed anything as true. So is sum is actually false because none of these values have passed our condition. So if we go now and say if value.rd is greater than or equal to 8, we'll go and return true. Okay. Now, something to take note of here is, let's actually log the value, is where it actually breaks out. Okay. So it's going to get to number 8 or RD8, and then it's actually going to stop looping because it's basically found what it wants. It's like saying some of this true, and yes, some of it is true. It's this one over here. Okay, so let's go and run that. Okay, so there we can see now. So it runs once, then twice, and then it gets to RD8. And RD8, is it greater than or equal to 8? It is. So we're going to return true, and then it breaks out. It's not going to loop anymore. We found that sum equals our condition. Now, yeah, so that's sum. Props if you find a place to use this. I mean, there are use cases, but it's very seldomly that you end up using this. So let's have a look at every now. Now, every is going to require all of these conditions to pass. So, for example, for us to have passed all of this, we could maybe say if RD is greater than or equal to 0, then that means this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true, this is true. Then it passed. Then sorry, let's just make this is every. So I'm going to push F2 here, which lets you rename. In many applications, you push F2 to rename things. So we're just going to say is every, and you're going to see it's actually going to rename it throughout our app. Because it's an object here, it's acting a bit strangely. Okay. So Now, is every is going to require all of these to pass whatever condition we are returning true here. So let's say we were to make it is greater than equal to 5. Okay, so that would be here. It would fit in here. This is going to be false, but these will be true. So when I save it now, you're going to see that I was going to just question my sanity there. Like, why was it true? But I forgot to change it to is every there. Okay, so you can see that immediately for the first one, is it greater than equal to 5? It's not. So it returns false, and immediately it breaks out. So if we were to have made this is greater than equal to 0 and save it, then you can see each one of them actually, each one has to pass, and then is every will become true. As soon as one thing does not match that condition, let's make it greater than equal to 10. Okay, so I actually want to reverse these. Okay, so I'm going to make it 20. Okay, so we're going to say if value ID is greater than 20. Okay, so we start at the top here, 111. That is greater than 20. Then is this greater than 20? 46 it is. Then it gets to the next one. Is this greater than 20? 28 it is. Then it gets to this one. Is RD10 greater than 20? It's not. So it's going to return false. And then as soon as false is returned, is every is going to be false at the end of the day. Because it requires all of these conditions to pass this condition that we've got here. Okay, so that's sum and every. So I don't think we're going to be looking at any other array methods now. What we're going to be looking at is just sort of best practices and chaining these methods. Okay, so the first one I want to look at in regards to sort of best practices, and it's just one thing that I just kind of want to deal with here. Let's say we had an array of people here, and we had name and it's John. Let's just duplicate these, and let's just say that's like their clones. So there's John 1, John 2, John 3. Okay, and then you were going to actually go and loop through these, right? So let's just say we're going to create a new array. Just going to call it new people. So when it comes to naming your stuff in your array methods, you're going to want to, for this current item here, you're going to want to try and name this according to what it actually is going to be. So I mean let's just say these are people. So this is a person. So instead of just going and writing here like element and then console log element, okay, so you can see we loop through it and we console log the element. That's like, it's a bit of a hard thing to understand, like what is element. So generally what you want to do is you want to try and use a singular form of whatever it is that you've got there. So maybe it's users, then what you'd want to have here is user. So now it's more intuitive. Like if there was maybe, like I can say user.name, you know, and then I'm actually getting the actual name property out of that object. But if it was just element.name, you know, just quickly looking at this, it's not really descriptive. You don't really know what's actually going on here. But whereas if you'd actually gone and named it like this, then it's a lot more intuitive when you're actually trying to read the code. Like I know that's going to be a user.name. So I think maybe in this case would have actually been probably better as this was like users. And then you can have your user coming in. Okay, so it's basically just try and name your stuff well if you can. Okay, so the next one we're going to be looking at is destructuring. That's actually probably going to be one of our lessons coming up, one of our sessions. Let's just go with is admin and just add it as true. Yeah, so this is destructuring. So generally destructuring is that if you've got an object, it's going to create something like this person is equal to name's John, and let's just say is admin. So destructuring is basically if I wanted to get these properties out of this person object. When you first start JavaScript day one, you'd be like const name is equal to person.name. Okay, but that's not really. It's difficult. It makes your code like a lot longer. It makes it harder to work with. Like imagine you had 10 properties, then you'd have to go and have sort of 10 lines of code like this if there were 10 properties here. And then if you wanted to change this person, you know, then you're gonna have to come along and have to change person over here and every single thing, which can be quick. Like you can use that, which is select next find match, I think it's called, and then you could just change it here to user. But you know, there's a much easier way for us to do this. So this is sort of like day one JavaScript. Then you can have 1 month JavaScript, where basically what you do is it started like this. On the right hand side, you've got the object. Then on the left hand side, we add our curly braces, and inside these curly braces, we can sort of choose any one of these properties that we want to now access, and that's going to sort of become like its own variable name. So we can just go name is admin, and now these variables are now available to me to be used. That's exactly the same as what we had earlier, where we said const name is equal to person. So it should actually be person. Also apologize for all the mistakes. It's blown up on my screen and it's a bit, it throws a person off. Okay, so this over here is exactly the same as this, but now imagine we also had is admin. Then we'd have to go and, you know, write all of these at once. But over here, it's one line of code basically. It might break down into more lines of code, depending on how many you've got here. Your format is going to automatically move it to the next line. But if I ever need to go and change this person, maybe this object's name changes. Let's just say it's cat. I would just have to change it in one place here. Whereas over here, I'd have to change it there, and I'd have to change it there. Okay, so that's destructuring. You could do the same thing with arrays, but I'm not going to be going into that now. So the main thing is that over here, we can actually destructure our values. So we can say const. This is the way that I typically do it, and it suggests doing it like this as well when you're starting out. You do the empty braces, and then you say equal to the user. Then you can go here and you can push Control Spacebar, and then immediately you're going to have access to the properties that are there. And that's going to avoid making mistakes. Okay, so that's like a quick way of sort of knowing that you're doing it right, as opposed to trying to type it out, like all of it out right now, and then go is user. The other way, by leaving this empty, you're actually allowing IntelliSense to do its job. Okay, so we could destructure name and is admin from user. But now, so this is now, you know, we've stepped up our game here. We can go and, so I'm going to do this. Okay, we can take this next level even further. Instead of destructuring user over here, we could actually destructure user over here as a parameter. So I'm just going to go and take this and just basically paste it there. So it's the exact same thing. It's this part over here. So just imagine that this is happening. This is equal to user, but it's sort of behind the scenes that it's happening. Okay. And now I can easily go and log the name and easily log is admin. So you'll come across this a lot in React, and you should try to apply this in your JavaScript. It just makes it so much cleaner compared to, you know, all of the other bloat that we sort of had going on there. And in React, you're going to see it like all the time. You can destructure your props in your components by destructuring it like this, and then as well as when you're mapping things out, you can also destructure it like this, and your code can end up being a lot more concise. I'm not going to say that it's always going to make your code cleaner. Maybe sometimes it might not be a good idea. But try and get the hang of doing this if you haven't. You'll really start to love it once you do get used to it. Okay, and then now the last one we're going to be looking at is sort of to wrap it all up, and it's probably the most coolest part of it all. Once again, I keep saying the most important, but it's also one of the very important things to know. And that is that you can chain your array methods. remember that it returns a new array. So you could have that new array go into a map, and then that map is going to return a new array. Then that array that's being returned can go into a filter. Okay, so you can chain these things like infinite long, maybe not up to infinite, but incredibly long, like hundreds of thousands. So let's sort of just play around here and say const new users is equal to, and I'm gonna say, okay, let's actually just add a value in here. Age of okay, so we've got a whole bunch of Johns here with different ages. Okay, so what we're first going to do is we're going to filter them by their age, and then we will map. If they're an admin, we will change their name to be King name, King John, whatever. Okay, so we're going to go and we can take users and we're going to filter it, right? And then after that, we're going to go and map it. So remember, filtering means that we're going to be removing some. So maybe this person disappears, maybe that person disappears. Then what's remaining here when we map it, it maps 1-to-1, but we get to adjust it. So we can change the age or change the name, do whatever we want with it. Okay, so first we're going to filter. And for that, you always want to code with like feedback. You want to see what's happening in your code. Okay, so we're going to filter. So we're going to go and say user, and let's console log the user. Save it so that we can see all the users, and there's our end result over there. What we're going to do is we're going to say if user.age is greater than equal to 40. So we're just going to end up with the 2 that we want. Then we will return true. Okay. So in our array at the end, we've now got John 2 and John 3. So I'm actually just going to just put a star there so you know that these are the values that we're actually getting out of them. Okay, so you know that we are now getting these 2. Okay, so now we're actually getting those 2, as you can see here. Now let's check. If admin is true, we're going to add admin to the start of their name. And it's not really a great use case here, but it's just to sort of demonstrate how these things can work. Okay, so you can see now I'm actually adding a dot after the end of this filter. So see that as like 1 unit. And then we're going to map the result from it, because this result of this filter is now getting passed to this map. So it's the same as saying users.filter.map. And we can just keep going. We can filter again over and over and over. Usually you're not going to go so many times, because each time we are filtering like this, we're actually looping through the array again. And if you've got a lot of records or items, objects or whatever, to loop each time is not efficient. Generally what you're going to try and do is you're going to try and be clever and get it done in one loop. And typically that happens with the reduce. But in this case, the main thing is we actually want to be demonstrating that you can chain these like this. So we're not going to worry about time complexity and all of that. Okay, so actually let me leave it over there. Okay, so we're going to save it, and it's not happy with us for some reason. Okay, so we're going to go and remember we actually destructured. What we're going to do is I'm actually destructure age here, just so that we can sort of practice what we're preaching. Okay, so you can see that still got the same thing working. Wondering if we should actually even make it more concise. No, okay. So now we're going to map, and I'm going to say user. Let's console log user now, and you will see we're only going to have these 2 users that are coming through. And then what we're going to say is if user.isAdmin is equal to true, and we don't have to say equals to true like this. What we can say is we can actually take it out like this, and this is going to evaluate to true, and this one will evaluate to false. So if it's like this, it's like saying if it's true. It's not exactly like that, but it's like saying if it's true. And then if you say is not admin, that if you say not admin, sorry, not is admin, then that's basically the same as saying user.isAdmin is equal to false. Sorry, let me just fix that up. I'm sorry. it's basically the same as saying that. Okay, so we're going to go and say user.isAdmin. And then if it is, we're going to return. What was I going to say? They're just admin. That's user.name. And else just return user.name. Okay, so here is our result at the end. We've now got just names getting returned here. Let's start from the beginning. So we first got all these users. Then if an age is above or equal to 40, which are these last two, then we keep just these two over here. The others aren't added to our new array. Then we're going to map through whatever's left, which is these last two. And we check here. If the isAdmin is true, we add this admin at the front of their name. And if admin is false, we don't do anything with the name. Okay, so now we've mapped these values one to one. But we haven't actually kept the whole thing. We've actually just gone and created our own thing over here. Okay, so that's chaining it. And with chaining, you can achieve some great things. But just keep in mind, though, that you don't want to be looping over records like 5 times. So even 3 times is sometimes too much. More often than not, 3 times is too much. Okay, so before we go and wrap this up, let's just actually go and try and make this a little bit more concise, just to show you that how it can look. So there's our old code there, and we're going to say filter age. And remember I showed you earlier that we can just have our condition here because that's going to evaluate to true or false. So we can go and say if age is greater than equal to 40. Okay, so remember that this line looked, it was like it's 4 lines, now it's 1 line. Okay, saved it, code is still running the same. Let's take that out so it's not, doesn't look like that. Okay, and then we're going to do the same thing here. This time we will go and make use of a ternary. So we will say, actually first before we do that, let's go and destructure this. So we're going to say isAdmin and name. We just want those values from here. We're going to take this out because we don't have the user there anymore. Okay, so now our code is the same. It's looking cleaner now. Over here, instead of this, we'll go and switch to a ternary now. So we'll say isAdmin. Then we can say, I'm actually just going to copy this. I don't have to write it out again. Or name. Okay, so it's because I'm not returning here, so we're going to return. Okay, so we've brought this down now to a ternary operator. And a ternary operator is that if you just got a true and false condition. You can chain them, but it's considered bad practice. It's basically, if you're just going to have a true or false condition, then you can make use of a ternary. So it's saying, here is your condition. If it's true, where this question mark is saying, if it's true, then this part is if it's true, this code will run if it's true, and then this code over here will run if it's false. Okay, so now the last thing is that we've got these curly braces, so we have to explicitly say there's a return, which just explicitly just means we have to say there's a return. But if we don't have the curly braces, then there is an implicit return we can make use of with an arrow function. Just cleaning up the formatting there, and then we save it. Okay, so now we've turned all of this code. It's 13 lines of code. We've now turned it into 2 lines of code. Well, it's actually technically 1 line of code, but it sort of spans over 3 lines. To me personally, I would say that this is still fun, but your JavaScript gurus out there, they can take these really complex sort of lead code questions, and they can turn it into like 3 or 4 lines of one-liners like this. That are incredibly hard to read, but are sort of amazing that they have coded it that way. Generally, you're not going to want to have code that is like flexing their muscles, that they can do this, because it becomes harder to read. And generally with code, I think it's like it's a ratio of 10 to 1 reading to actual coding. So you want your code to be more readable than sort of flexing muscles. So in a case like this one line is possibly alright, but if you've like got all this really complex logic and you're just doing it to sort of flex, then it's most likely good for your portfolio on your own projects, but for the workplace, you don't want to be doing that. You want your code to be neat. Like your team leads in that, they're going to say that, like, I'd rather have more lines of code with code that's more readable than you trying to be fancy. Okay. Okay, so that's where we're going to leave off with the array methods. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I'm sorry if I droned on a bit. Please feel free to let us know on the ZA Tech Slack server. We're in the FEDSA mentoring channel. Please let us know there if there's anything we can improve in the video, or if you just don't like it, or if you want to just come say, hey, thanks for making that video. We're there throughout the week, even on the weekends, but particularly on Friday, we've actually got some senior devs that hang around, and we try and help out any person, you know, like fun projects they might have, or, you know, just any problems that they might have in regards to the code. Not even just code, even things like interviews, anything to try and sort of, you know, empower them so that they can get their career into their own hands. Code Capsules, big shout out to them. They were the ones to sponsor these sessions. An amazing team, and building an amazing product. So proud that you know, this is a South African team that's actually building out something like this. I think it's just amazing what they're busy doing. So be sure to just check them out. It's really, really cool stuff. And they're actually also there to also help out on Fridays. Yeah. Okay, so these will be released once a week. I'll drop the exercises in the YouTube description once they're done. And yeah, be sure to come check us out in the ZA Tech server. Would love to say hello and meet all of you. All right, cool. This is Martin. Cheers.